Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our common chess games played by computer series. So in this series we're covering some great games that have been played by top engines, and today we'll analyze a beautiful game played by the two best engines, Leela C0 versus Stockfish 15, in an opening that we haven't covered so many times here on my channel. Today we'll see how Stockfish brutalized Leela C0 with the black pieces in the Scandinavian defense. This is really wild what happened. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw this game, because the Scandinavian is something that I would not recommend you to play. It's such a wild open battle in the early stage of the game, so that's why you should find really something else. But the Stockfish can play whatever Stockfish wants to play. So look at this, how Stockfish will now destroy its arch enemy Leela C0 in this brutal tactical opening. So let's see now the king of the north, because of course we know that one of the main developers from of the Stockfish engine is from Scandinavia. So let's see now the king of the north playing the northern opening, the Scandinavian defense. So here e4 was played by Leela C0. We, as promised, here we have the Scandinavian defense immediately with the move d5. Okay, e takes d5, queen to d5. The good side about the Scandinavian defense, let's analyze a little bit already this position, is that you have already pieced out. Your opponent from white's perspective doesn't have any pieces out, which is of course for black a good thing. But we have to say it, your queen in the center of the board will be exposed. Your queen in the center of the board will be attacked many times, or will be threatened many times by minor pieces of white. So that's why you lose further time by some attacks by white. So that's why it's of course a downside, and then white develops simply in a good way and has now then afterwards good attacking chances. So here in the continuation, or immediately here by Leela C0, knight to c3, and you see now you lose already a tempo. So now d4 played by Leela C0, we have knight to f6, we have now the so-called Mises variation, knight to f3, we have c6, preventing some ideas of d5, because if white manages to push the pawn on d5 in a good way, then you could have some problems. Then of course white is getting too many spaces. So here the continuation, bishop to c4, Leela C0 is preparing maybe here the breakthrough d5 further. We have bishop to f5, also developing the bishop. If you of course play immediately e6, this is not good. You have maybe a further control of the d5 square, but look at this, now your bishop is simply paralyzed by its own pawn. In the near future white will, I think, occupy the e5 square, will control this e5 square. You'll never be able to advance the pawn further, so it's now, I think, a strategic disaster here for black. So this is not a way to go. So that's why you have to get out with your bishop. Bishop to f5 was played by Stockfish 15, knight to e5, preparing now a very aggressive method with the move g4, because we have to say now the queen is a little bit exposed here. In the near future also bishop to d2 can happen, and also the bishop on f5. So these two pieces are exposed, they are out, but they're on good squares, we have to say it, but they could be really attacked and could create now good attacking chances for white. So here in the continuation, Stockfish plays e6. We have now this method, the g4, immediately by Leela C0. And the cool part is there is also a beautiful game played by Alireza Firouzja versus Magnus Carlsen in the database, in which Alireza destroyed Magnus in this particular line. So they play exactly this particular position also from this point on. So as I said, look at this also in the database, check it out. It's, I think, also a game worth a study and a very instructive game. Maybe in the later stage of our channel we'll see maybe also the Firouzja Carlsen Scandinavian game. So but okay, g5 or g4 immediately by Leela C0, kicking away the bishop to g6. If you try now knight to g6, h takes g6, you have sort of an advantage. You have still the bishop here on the board, but look at this now, bishop to d6 will happen. This is now weakness on h2. Knight to d7 will happen. Still you have a good control of the d5 square. Bishop to d6, maybe even queen to c7, then queen set castling, continuing maybe the pressure on the d file. So it's maybe a slightly better position for white, but I don't think that the bishop pair is so important in this position, especially because of the open h file and the dark square problem for white. Now, as I said, black will control further the dark squares in the continuation of the game. So here in the continuation we have h4 threatening h5. Here in we have a knight to d7. Bishop to d2 is of course not an opportunity immediately. This could be a threat to create discoveries, but of course knight to e5, d takes e5, and then queen to e5. So that's why you have to make a reaction. After knight to d7, here Leela c0 simply took. We have knight takes d7, and now h5. But the bishop is not strapped here because of the pin by the queen against the knight. So that's why bishop to e4 is still an opportunity. We have here kingside castling, and now you see the bishop is hanging. Stockfish has now to move the bishop on d5. And okay, exactly also the position happened between Firouzja and Carlsen, so this is sort of a main line in this particular variation. But notice that actually Stockfish didn't castle so far in the game, which is really, really good when we think about this harder, because if you would have already castled here on the king side from black's perspective, I think then white would be much, much better. Especially, look at this. We can take out now maybe the bishop on d5, then continue with the pressure. We can play f4, f5. I wouldn't love to play now the game from black's perspective if black would have, for instance, castled here on the king side. So that's why so far the king in the center is perfectly fine. Many times you should not play like this. Many times you should not stay with the king in the center, but so far it's a good strategy to keep the king a little bit further in the center of the board. So here we have knight to d5, c takes d5, and okay, again, when we watch now a little bit the structure, black has still a healthy pawn structure. We have here 2 pawn islands, also white has 2 pawn islands, so nothing dramatically changed in the pawn structure. The pawn structure is healthy, but white is of course a slight advantage because of the bishop here. But still, black has the flexibility to castle queenside, or maybe also to castle kingside. So a bishop to d3. Here Leela c0 is waiting simply black to castle on kingside, then to push f4, f5, and similar stuff. But now after move g6, Stockfish is trying now to open the position. For instance, if something like g takes h5 happens, then maybe of course g takes h5, and then rook to g8 opens simply the position against the king. So that's why now Leela c0 suddenly tried to keep the position on the king side locked. Is still waiting black to castle kingside, but that's not going to happen because after bishop to d6, queen to f3, here Stockfish 15 simply castled queenside, castled out of the attack of Leela c0. And we have seen now recently also a couple of games played by Stockfish 15 with the black pieces in the French defense. If you have covered, if you have maybe seen my YouTube chat channel's last games that we have analyzed, a similar position happened where Stockfish stayed a little bit further with the king in the center, waited white to expose himself with the attack, and then castle out of the attack, or move the king simply out of the attack without castling. So many times Stockfish is doing such a strategy. Maybe you should try it out sometimes as your surprise plan against your opponents. Maybe not in Scandinavian games or French defense games, but sometimes, as I said, king in the center, waiting. If your opponent exposes, then castle out of this mess, and then attack him on that side where he is supposed to be better. So really good strategies here by Stockfish 15. So now Leela c0 has the bishop pair, is trying now to make something out of this position. Played now simply the move c4, which is of course an aggressive method. It's an aggressive move how to open the position, but the downside about this move is that actually after here d takes c4, you are left with an isolated d pawn. This is now a strategic disadvantage here in white's position. Instead of the c4 move, you could also play maybe queen to f7. Let's go back. So you can maybe take out this pawn, but actually the serious threat is this move, queen to b6. It seems like a calm move, but actually it's a great move. Look at this, the pawn on d4 is hanging. You cannot also move the bishop because this pawn is hanging, and the problem is you cannot take out the pawn on e6 because you get here bishop to h2. This is the serious threat. And now in a couple more moves, maybe also rook to f8 could happen, and if that happens, then suddenly your queen gets trapped. So look at this here, you have to move the queen maybe here to f3, but now black simply takes the pawn on d4, will eventually play rook to f8, and suddenly black is taking over in the position. So there's simply no time to take out this pawn. White would love, I think, now to take just one pawn and simplify the game, going into a favorable ending, but so far it's not working because the queen could be exposed here. here. So that's why c4, as I said, is aggressive. You want to play an open game when you have the bishops on the board, but the downside is now this isolated pawn on the default. So bishop to c4, we have king to b8. Again, if you try queen to f7, it doesn't get better, because look at this, bishop to c7 is now also a threat. You can maybe try even to take out this pawn, but look at this, rook to e8, the queen maybe moves here to d5. Now when white would have maybe taken these 2 pawns, white would love, I think, again, to simplify the game by trading off the queens, but this is not working now. Queen to b6, now there is of course the threat maybe of knight to e5, attacking the queen and taking also the bishop. So now maybe bishop to e3, and look at this, even this is working. Rook takes e3 is, for instance, a serious threat. Bishop f takes e3, now knight to e5, look at this, the queen is hanging, the bishop is hanging. You can maybe try here also, for instance, to trade off the queens, but now we simply take. If you take of course the queen, then we can take out with the knight. If you take out with the queen now, then queen to b2, and there is no good way to protect your f2 your h2 weakness. If you cover yourself with the move queen rook to f2, then the queen will take out the rook on h1. So really a bad game here for white. So as I said, this is this queen to f7 is simply not working as your tactical plan. This pawn is the weakness, but it cannot be taken immediately, so that's why Stockfish had the opportunity to even play the move king to b8 in order to improve now further the position of the king. If you play something like bishop to f4, then I think the game becomes simply too simplified. Look at this, here we can play queen to after queen to f4, we can cover ourselves. We can also play here the move e5, but again, I'm pointing out, even if that happens, still white is continuing the game with an isolated pawn. Even if the position gets more and more simplified, if you could just imagine this position without the rooks, without the queens, without the bishop and the knight on the board, then black is much better, because black will simply move up to this king and will attack simply this structural weaknesses that white is built with the move c4. So as I said, this is not working for white also to simplify the game. So after move king to b8, we have rook to d1. Rook to f8, finally Stockfish protected this pawn on f7, and now bishop to d2. We have queen to c7, bishop to b3, trying to open of course the c file, attacking the queen, and now knight to b6. This is a beautiful move by Stockfish 15, because as said, we have now an isolated pawn, and the best way to handle isolated pawns is to play a blockade in front of this pawn. So now Stockfish 15 is trying to keep the position compact around the square d5. Very important move, not allowing here white to push the pawn further on d5 to liberate this position, to get rid of this isolated pawn situation. So we have bishop to g5, f6, kicking with the bishop, bishop to d2, a rook to e8, and now rook from a to c1, attacking the queen, queen to d7, and now rook to e1, also attacking the pawn on e6. So now a6, we have rook to e2, and now knight to d5. As promised, now Stockfish is creating the blockade. Very nice setup, and now Stockfish is trying maybe here also to push the pawns, maybe open the position against white's king here on the king side. So rook from c to e7, we have knight to c7, protecting further the e6 square. We have a4, f5, very nice move by Stockfish 15. If of course g takes f5 happens, then rook to f5 is very nice. Look at this, the position gets opened. Now suddenly black is much better, although white has the bishop pair. White wants to open the game, but now with this move black is suddenly taking over and should, I think, win this game. So this is not working, so that's why g5 by Leela c0, passing through, trying to keep the position on the king side locked. We have now f4 by Stockfish, trying rook to f5, and then also to attack here the weak pawn on g5. So bishop to c2, protecting of course here the f5 square. So the problem of course for white is, okay, you are controlling maybe this d5, you're controlling also the e6, you're attacking it further, but now you have to control the f5. If that happens, then suddenly black could be very bad. So that's why it's not working. Bishop to c2, preventing rook to f5. So This allows now black to play knight to d5. That's now the downside about the move bishop to c2. In the continuation we have bishop to e4, but now knight to e7, and here again the knight moves to f5. So now we have a cool maneuver here by the knight, and suddenly black is maneuvering the pieces towards the king side. Look at this, now the rook is already here, this rook is also dangerous, the bishop is here, queen is also attacking, I think, a little bit the queen side, although it's temporarily blocked out. But now the knight could come here on h4, and then with f3 this could be very dangerous. So look at this, really already a nice attacking formation by Stockfish 15. So we have here now rook to d2 by Leela c0, rook to f7. Stockfish is building now a battery on the f file. We have a5, queen to d8, attacking now the pawn on g5, and here queen to g4 has to be played. Leela c0 has now to protect the pawn on g5. So f3, this is really a beautiful move by Stockfish 15. This is a temporarily pawn sacrifice, but this pawn sacrifice actually opened the position, because actually this pawn is standing in our way. We don't want to have this pawn, we want to open the f file. So that's why f3 is really beautiful move. There are now two choices what you should do. In the continuation, Leela c0 tried rook to d3, attacking now further the pawn on f3. But look at this, if you play bishop to f3 immediately, you get this one, knight to h4. You take maybe queen to h4, but you get simply rook takes f3, and suddenly again this is a long-term weakness. We can attack this pawn further with the move rook to f5, then rook to g5 will happen in a couple more moves. If you try, for instance, bishop to h1 here, if you don't want to lose your bishop, if you want to retreat with the bishop here, then it's not getting better, because look at this, rook to f4 will happen. You have to step back with the queen. Now we play rook to f5 again. This pawn is weak. Now you can maybe take out the knight, but look at this, rook to g5, you have to play king to f1. Now look at this, rook to g1, and the queen will be taken. So this is not working for white. Black is breaking here the position for sure. So that's why bishop to f3 actually is not working here for white. So that's why rook to d3 played by Leela c0. But now comes the actual tactical problem about this move rook to d3. Rook to d3 is somehow, this is really wild, this move rook to d3 is actually connected somehow to this square h6, and Stockfish realized it and played now really a sick and perfect tactical shot. Look at this, knight to h6. This is really wild, because after g takes h6, now again this motif, rook to f4, the queen has now to move. Queen comes now on g5. You cannot of course move the king to h1. You get simply rook to h4. If you take, then you get even checkmated here on g2. So that's why you have to step back here towards the center. You have to play king to f1, but now comes queen to b5. Look how the tactics are spread all over the board by Stockfish. Stockfish uses every diagonal file rank. So now the queen comes here, and actually this rook is pinned, and also the key protector of this bishop is of the rook is attacked. Now the bishop on e4 is hanging. In the continuation we have king to g1, but now rook to e4, and now this rook is unprotected, and suddenly Stockfish is taking over. So really wild tactical shot. So we have rook to e3. So Leela c0 is now attacking the main weakness, but also it was in the beginning the main strength of blacks, this annoying pawn on f3. Now we have queen to c2, queen takes f3, rook to f8, attacking the queen, queen to e2, but now queen to b1. Here Leela c0 covers with bishop to e1, queen to f5. Here Stockfish doesn't want to trade off the queens, doesn't want to simplify the game too much, because still it's unclear if the position is too simplified, then it could be maybe a draw endgame. Stockfish is keeping the pieces on the board and is trying now to win this endgame. So rook to e6, queen to g5, king to f1, queen to h6. Actually here rook takes d6 is not working, because you get queen to h1. Beautiful checkmate. So you don't have time. So that's why queen to e3. We have queen to h1 anyway, king to e2, and now again a new check, again a couple of perpetuals, but now queen to d5. That's how you're supposed to play such an endgame with the queens on the board. Centralization is a very important principle here. Look at this, bishop is very centralized here, the queen is in the center of the board, the rook is very active, so this is the way to go. Now from this center, the queen has many options, the queen has now many opportunities to attack the position further. We have to also say this is now a huge advantage here, this passer on the h file. Now Stockfish has just to push the pawn and has now, I think, a completely winning endgame here. So rook to e8, we have rook to e8, queen to e8, king to c7. No perpetuals by white are possible, so that's why queen to h8, trying to at least grab one of these pawns. But now again a check, again a check, again a couple of perpetuals. But now with queen to f5, Stockfish pushes the main advantage, now the pass pawn on the h file. So queen to h7, we have king to b8, queen to g8. Again, the king moves here to a7. No perpetuals again are possible for white, so that's why we have here f3, queen to g5. Again, a couple of checks. Now bishop to b8 here. Stockfish is again just preparing to push this pawn further. In the continuation, we have bishop to f2, trying maybe this idea, d5, sort of a discovered attack. Here in the continuation, we have h4, d5. It's not such a huge problem because Stockfish has the opportunity to hide with the king here on a8. So we have d6, pushing the pawn further. A couple of checks again by Stockfish, queen to g5. Again, the king moves to f1, and now Stockfish again just pushes the pawn further. We have queen to h8, we have queen to f5. The king moves to e2, again a new check, and now Stockfish again just pushes the pawn further. Leela c0 took, but now this is a very nice motif. Stockfish is realizing if Stockfish manages, for instance, to take out this pawn, and maybe trades off everything, trades off maybe the queen and the bishop for the queen and the bishop, then here Stockfish can create, of course, a pass pawn and would have then a completely winning endgame. So that's why here after king to d2, queen takes b2, mission accomplished. I think the first mission is, I think, accomplished. Now Stockfish grabbed this very important b pawn. We have queen to e1, king to b1, and again a couple of checks. We have again a couple of checks. Now Leela c0 has to hide here, has to cover with the bishop, but now Stockfish takes out this pawn, and this is now completely winning endgame here for Stockfish 15. So king to c1, queen to a3, king to d1, queen to d3. Now the queen covers, and Stockfish suddenly traded off the queens after bishop king to d2. Now Stockfish has time to stop this passer and has now, as I said, completely winning endgame. So we have here king to d3, king to c8, king to e4, king to d7, just in time to attack this pawn. We have king to d5, bishop to e3. Now Stockfish is trying to get behind this pawn, tries to attack it further. We have bishop to b4, bishop to f4, bishop to c f4 here by Stockfish, bishop to c5 by Leela c0, g5, and after bishop to b4 in this position, Leela c0 resigned. There is always this threat just to push the pawn further. If you move the bishop, then we can also take out this pawn. This pawn is also on the dark square. In the near future, it can be also a problem. So, as I said, in this position, Leela c0 resigned. So, really wild stuff. Great game, I think, in the Scandinavian defense. This is really the king of the north. Stockfish 15, really brilliant performance. I'm not a big fan of the Scandinavian. I really don't dare to play this opening, but if you want to play this opening, I think this could be also a very nice cornerstone for you. Maybe this game you can analyze further with some different sidelines, with some different possibilities. And in the near future, I think we could also pull off the game between Alireza versus Magnus Carlsen. We'll see how Magnus handled the Scandinavian from Black's perspective. Magnus is a big lover, I think, of the Scandinavian. He played it many times on his stream. So as I said, it's not something worth for me, but maybe it's something worth for you, and maybe you can surprise your opponent with this while opening. So okay, I hope that you really enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot, especially the tactics with the move knight to h6. If you want to see more brutal games like this, check out my commented chess games played by computer series with some more games played by Alpha Zero, Leela Zero, Stockfish engine, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.